Welcome, everybody, to our October 7th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our September meeting. Do I have any changes that need to be recorded? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
I have a motion to accept as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay.
Abstain.
And one abstention. I will let everybody know that item J will not be discussed tonight. The Article 4 of the Fairhope subdivision regulation changes, that will not be discussed tonight. And also, the comprehensive plan discussion we're going to put at the end of the meeting after item K. So moving on, our first half dozen items are 115211 request by C Spire. Hunter, you're up.
Oh, you got election of officers and approval of the schedule, sorry, for the old and new business.
Okay. Good. All right. Excuse me. First item on the agenda are election of officers. Does anybody want to make any nominations for officers this time?
I nominate the current officers.
All right. I have a motion to nominate the current officers. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion on that?
For the record, will you just state who the current officers are?
Myself as president, Rebecca, and I guess our current secretary, Cindy.
Thank you.
All right. Any other further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. 2025 schedule of meetings. Do we?
So on the screen is the commission deadlines proposed for 2025. I'll just point out, like every year, a couple of dates that have been moved due to holidays on the submittal deadlines is the December submittal coming up this year. And then in 2025, November submittal moved due to Thanksgiving. And then for the actual planning commission dates, the September, November were moved to Thursdays due to a holiday for Labor Day and then a conflict with the city council organizational meeting. We moved to Thursday in November.
All right. Do I have a motion to accept the approval of the 2025 meeting schedule?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Comprehensive plan discussion will be at the end of the meeting, so we're moving on to our 115211s.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mike's going to get up. We've got a few of these. We're going to kind of run through these a little bit quicker. Just a quick prelude, and I don't know if anybody's here with us from C Spire. All of these are C Spire. We have had a ramp up in calls. So I just want to think these 115211 reviews, we typically get those done as fast as possible. But, you know, I don't want to have to change our processes, but I would ask C Spire be responsible for their contractors because it seems like our calls of hitting other things, including other copper lines, fiber lines, things like that, has really increased. You know, and sometimes that's subcontractors, and that can be a challenge. While I understand that, you know, we don't want to really go implement new rules that draws it out for everybody else. But there's a lot of activity in our right-of-ways right now, and taking the time to find where what's existing before we tear it up is I think worth the effort. So if there's just a little bit more opportunity to check that and meet some of the requirements, as we will put a list here, and some of those are really focused on finding what's actually there, including if you have to pull up out a shovel and do some digging if there's any questions. So with that said, I'm going to pass it to Mike. He'll go run through these. One of the amendments where we're going to make, and should have it back to you next week, is we'd like to implement a consent agenda for these, so we can only vote once, but tonight we will still have to vote on each case. But we're going to run through each map and then vote. Ask you to vote on each one.
So just for clarification, we're going to go through all of them at first in one fell swoop, and then I'll ask for motions for each of them individually, 1 through 6, back to back. Got it. Thank you.
That is correct. And if there's any questions on any of the individual ones as we're going through, please stop me. We can go to more detail and answer any questions that you guys may have. So the first 115211, again for C Spire, is going to be in the, from Fairhope Avenue to North Avenue, kind of in the Kiefer, Atkinson, Oak Street area. On the screen, you can see the aerial, the green lines outline the proposed area for work in this area. Wanted to point out for C Spire that part of this is on Church Street. That part of Church Street is brand new. With the age of the road, any road cuts, depending on the type of work, which will be reviewed during the permitting with David Thomas and those guys. But there could be increased permitting fees for those depending on the right-of-way ordinance and what those fee schedule is. And that was the one review comment extra to this one, other than the standard comments, with the caveat that this is an older established part of town. So this is one area that will have, we'll say, hidden utilities that, care and dedication will need to be maintained for that. I'll read these once, the staff approval for utility 2409 to the following conditions, and these conditions apply to all of the ones that we will be going over, is that a pre-construction meeting shall be held with the city prior to issuance of any permits, consultation with the city's horticulturalist to determine if the required depth of bore must be increased so there's no impact to the trees. The contractor is responsible for any damaged trees. At all street crossing locations, conducting potholing, determine the exact locations and elevations of existing utilities, reflect the exact same elevations of utilities and GPS coordinates of the pothole locations on a set of as-built drawings. An additional right-of-way permit may be required for the potholing procedures. Follow-up activities required by staff is we will need to review and approve the as-built and be submitted to our GIS technician to include those in our utility maps. Provide door hangers for the approval at time of pre-construction, and those door hangers shall be placed no later than 7 days prior to any construction. Provide traffic control plan to the right-of-way inspector prior to commencement of any work. Ensure enough space for proposed work is available within existing easement. If not, the applicant is responsible for either expanding existing easement or acquiring additional easement. The applicant shall contact Alabama One Call to locate all existing utilities. 750 feet are a maximum per day, and these all have a phased plan that goes with them with that limitation. 10, the utility boxes shall be concentrated near existing boxes. And 11, for permitting purposes, applicants shall provide subsurface utility engineering quality level C unless otherwise required by the Fairhope Building Department. And again, those are going to be the conditions for each one of these as we go through. The second area is going to be right off of Fairhope Avenue on the south side between Greeno and School Street. Again, another older portion of town where the right-of-ways have utilities and drainage that are in there now. Utility 2411, a little smaller area. This is off of Hunter's Glen neighborhood and County Road 13. Important note on this one is the permitting portion that the city of Fairhope will be doing is the work that is done inside of County Road 13. The other right-of-ways that are located on the east side inside the actual neighborhood will require building permits from Baldwin County Highway Department for that work. Next is again on County Road 13 in Gayfer, located in the Carria Point neighborhood. All permits will go through the city of Fairhope. UR 2413. This area is again on 13, goes down across from where Fox Hollow and Nichols Avenue extension is. Then 2414. This area is again Gayfer Road extension and Stratford Street, going through that neighborhood. Staff's recommendation is approval for all 6 of these utility reviews, subject to the following conditions I listed at the beginning for all of those. Yep. Yes, sir.
Any questions for Mike at this time? All right. Is anybody here on behalf of C Spire to speak? All right, this is not a public hearing, but since we've got 6 of these, if anybody would like to speak, I'll open the microphone for a few moments. Yes, sir. And please state your name and your address for our secretary.
So I'm Bob Comstock. I live on the southeast corner of Bayview and Oak, 114 North Bayview. For the record, I'm opposed to adding a 3rd internet line in our neighborhood. I don't know where we stop, 4, 5, or 6. I've already got 5 utility lines in the right-of-way on that south side of Oak that go from Bayview all the way up to Summit. If you want to keep the 36-inch division between lines, there isn't room. I've got 2 internet lines, the electric line, the water line, and a buried culvert that runs in front of our house. Unless they put the line on the other side of the street that only has a gas line, which could be a solution, or they don't come up from Bayview to past my house on Oak, they could come down and stop there, could be a solution. So in addition, we've just finished a lot of landscaping over the last year or so, and the last time AT&T and Mediacom buried lines there, they left it in a big mess. I know y'all have, promises to have inspectors, but they can't be everywhere at the same time. These subcontractors do not keep to the limits that you propose for daily installation and inspection. They do not. They say they do, but they don't. I've witnessed it myself. They don't put the sod back where it's supposed to go. They leave driveways a mess. So my preference is don't approve this one for Summit. And if you have to, make sure they do it on the north side of Oak Street from Bayview up to Summit, where there's only one line. That's the gas line. Or worst case, come down and stop there at the corner of 104 Oak. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Yes, sir. Anybody else have anything to say at this point? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Eric Zubler. I live at 105 Powell Avenue, and we moved in about a year ago, and 3 weeks into our residency there, we started having sewer troubles, and it turns out that as AT&T installed their lines, our sewer was broken. We had to take all the clothes out of our closets because that was where it was affected. We had to throw the carpet away. We still have it recarpeted. But it was just a huge mess and not a good way to start. In order to run the line and get the sewer line fixed, they had to take out the most beautiful Japanese maple tree you could imagine. They left red clay soil and just a big pile of mess where this gorgeous tree had been. I've tried to plant things there. I'm not having much luck, but I just don't want to see our neighborhood torn up yet again with all of this construction and all of these trees. And they're getting ready to repave Bayview, and I just wonder how it will affect all of that and delay that or whatever. But we're kind of tired of all of this and just would recommend that you not approve it for the Bluffs neighborhood, please.
Thank you, sir. All right, anybody else wish to speak to this item? All right, I will not close the public hearing since we don't have a public hearing on this. Hunter, this is the first time I think we've ever had a negative comment on lines coming in. Usually people are hallelujah, Bob, when they come in, but we don't really have much control as far as with the different agreements and franchises.
So there
and all.
is a franchise agreement that gives authority to install in the right-of-way. We have to have that to encourage people to come in. We now have AT&T upgrading and 2 kind of new ones that are very prolific in their installations, which long-term is a good thing. But as I kind of mentioned on the front end, we are seeing a lot of complaints there. So what we will do, there's a right-of-way permit for each of these, and our right-of-way inspectors monitor those permits and the installation of those. So we will pass these comments along. I don't think this is a black and white stop it. That's not what this 115211 review is. but we will certainly pass those comments along and would encourage anyone. One of the toughest things for us to do as a city is knowing when, a lot of times it's happening on the weekends. There's subcontractor of a subcontractor installing and boring some of these things in. So if it's a problem, it's good to catch it early. Sometimes it's a new subcontractor that's, we've seen situations where they're not even licensed within the city. So if you foresee anything in the neighborhood, please reach out to the city. You can, we typically won't be the ones, but you can certainly call the planning department and we'll get you in touch with the right people.
And I would add, excuse me, that you do have the purview to review under 115211, the location, character, and extent of these utility infrastructures. So particularly for the gentleman that mentioned across the street and that sort of thing, that is something that you could mandate or require. I don't know from city's perspective, which side city would prefer, and maybe that's better to table if you were inclined that way, to let the city evaluate that further. But you certainly do have the purview in terms of the location, the character, and the extent of the proposed development.
Okay.
I'll say over the last couple of years with all this stuff going on, we now have 2 full-time right-of-way inspectors that are staying on top of them, and we have a full-time utilities inspector, and that's also part of requiring the subsurface level C drawings to give you a more accurate of what is actually there. So, and I think one of the conditions is to coordinate with Jamie with the horticulture to make sure we're not damaging trees or doing the best we can not to. So there's a lot of people out there now, and especially since this has gone on the last 3 years, there's a lot of eyes staying on top of them because we've had instances where, and we've had issues that have come up. So we've got more people out there now trying to keep track of it.
Have you guys seen, and just looking at the horticultural requirements, and protective barriers shall be used for all trees, a minimum of 20 foot from the trunk. I don't know that I've really seen that in the field happening.
So and every one of these we come to you, sometimes there's a different flavor. Sometimes it's overhead, sometimes they're
Yeah.
boring, and when they're boring, really we're expecting the protections is around near the bore pits, which they're supposed to stay away from the trees anyway.
Yeah.
In the bore pits, because you've got to get an access.
Well, if they had a barrier,
might
then
go-
they would know to do that.
Right. And that I think is the problem. It's happening so fast. They're in and out and made their mess before we get a chance. So, again, we will, and this is the case, I believe both of the gentlemen that spoke was within the same case. So if you would like to hold this one off and let us get a little bit more information, see how we can evaluate both sides of the road with right-of-way, see where that would be more appropriate if there's any issues. Now, we've got some drainage on the other side, but I'm not ready to make a stand. I don't know what is in that right-of-way, but we can certainly check that and report back to you next month if you want to hold this one. Yeah, and certainly would like for them to be here, so maybe we can get them back in next week or next month and talk about some of these issues and see if they have any ideas how we can, it's the same thing from the city. A lot of
So
our.
this is, you are 25, both spoke
2409.
2409?
Yes,
Okay.
because they're damaging our property too. I don't know if a lot of you see water outages, electric outages, sewer's been hit. A lot of times that's coming from these bores coming in and hitting even our gas lines, electric, water, sewer. So we have a stake in it too, and we'd like to get some answers on
Well,
how we can.
and now that this is in the public record, right? Because it went out in our agenda, so anybody in one of these neighborhoods can see what they're supposed to do.
Right.
And if they're not doing these things,
And
call in.
they are also, one of the things on that list, we started out, they have to have a phone number. Well, that was, you get in a phone tree. So that requirement is actually the number on that hang tag. They're supposed to be door hangers before they start work. The number on that hang tag goes to someone that can answer questions about each of these phases. So there should be a door hanger before they start work. If there's not, please let us know. Because I think we can halt any future permits until if they're not doing that, kind of what they're agreeing to do, we certainly need some feedback on that. Okay.
Thank you, Hunter.
Yes, sir.
All right, Commissioners, so we've got 115211 applications. We've got some folks who would like us to hold off a month on the first one to just check and make sure that the lines are going through in the best places. I don't think we can ultimately stop it, but certainly look into it and let them know that we're watching that with a keen eye. I don't have a problem at all with, can we carry this over? What is the date of our next meeting?
I think it's November 4th.
So that's less than our 30
And you
days, so
can.
we can hold this one over
Yes.
then. Okay. All right, so first, UR 2409, do I have a motion?
I move we table UR 24.09.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor to table UR 2409, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. UR 2410, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve UR 2410, subject to staff recommendations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. UR 2411. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve UR 2411, subject to staff recommendations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. UR 2412. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve UR 2412, subject to staff recommendations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. And UR 2413. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve 24.13, subject to staff recommendations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. And finally, UR 2414. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve 24.14, subject to staff recommendations.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, SR 2403, Sherwin-Williams for a approval of a Highway 181 and 104 on the northeast corner. Site plan approval.
Okay, thank you. So this is a site plan review for Sherwin-Williams on Lot 5 of the Encounter development. So Jade is the applicant on account of the owner Encounter Development for Sherwin-Williams on Lot 5. It's on the northeast corner of the Alabama Highways 104 and 181, like the chairman said. And Trey Genwright is the authorized agent engineer for the project. The lot itself is less than an acre, 0.9, and is zoned B2, and the proposed building is 4,081 square feet. So there's the entire Encounter development. That's Lot 5 highlighted. What this is going to go. There's the site plan. And Jade's actually here. I think that they are going to want to mention something about this apron, bring it to your attention and get some thoughts, so they'll come up after this. But they have overage and parking, and those are the permeable ones right there facing 181, just FYI. And you can see the internal sidewalks and stuff in there as well, going out to Bushel Drive. Okay, so the setbacks are varied, but B2 requires only a 20-foot front setback, according to the table in the zoning regulations. Lot 5 fronts Alabama Highway 181, and that actually has a 125-foot highway construction setback. And the other setback on this one is a 25 rear setback on Bushel Drive. The building height is 1 story. It's estimated to be 25 feet. The building itself takes up 10% of Lot 5, and most of us are probably familiar with Sherwin-Williams. It's a national chain paint store. The complete build-out and information and details about the floor plans and whatnot are, and as well as all the elevations are in the packet. But the front elevations or west elevation is shown in this picture. And the materials are brick stucco with some possible stone accents. So the landscaping plan has been reviewed and also approved. We went through some variations. Jamie had suggested subbing a bald cypress with crepe myrtles, which they've done, and adding vegetation at the curve to the entrance from Bushel Drive. And also, they added some additional trees around the sign in the southwest corner of the lot. There is required additional landscaping along Highway 181 for the parking lot buffer, and there's a 10-foot landscape buffer. It's required at the front of the lot per the landscape and tree ordinance, and Lot 5 has a 20-foot of landscaping fronting Alabama 181, and there is a 20-foot landscape buffer along Bushel Drive. 10-foot landscape buffers separate these lots in this row. So the original plan had 23 spaces, which is too much. It can only go up to 16, and the requirement was 13. But so anything in excess of that has to be permeable, and those are the ones that I was pointing out along Highway 181 with all those other parking spots. The site plan does include interior sidewalks that are within the site, and they connect to the adjacent lots and also the sidewalk that's on Bushel Drive. The mechanical equipment has been finalized, and they all appear on the site plan. The dumpster location, garbage is located in 2 commercial dumpsters, and it's located in a delivery area of the lot, which is kind of this speckled stuff right here. And there's those 2 dumpster locations right there. So drainage has been accounted for the entire counter development when we did that last year, I think it was. And there are not detention facilities on each individual lots. There is a large retention pond within Lot 12 of the encounter development where most of the drainage is directed to. And the sign plan was submitted, and it conforms to the sign ordinance. The exterior lights, they had too many at first. They were too tall, they were too high at 25 feet. So if a parking lot has 50 or fewer parking spaces, then the light poles should not exceed 10 feet overall. And they are right at 10 because the pole note right there reads 8 plus 2 for the structure, so that equals 10. Erosion control plan was submitted with the application, and it is acceptable. A utility plan was submitted, and it has been reviewed and approved by the appropriate providers. ADA requirements have been met. The encounter development had a thorough traffic study, and these things were designed in accordance with the recommendations from the traffic study. However, this is a reoccurring thing for Jade, so we'll have to point this out. They do have 30 miles posted speed limit. I think it's actually supposed to be 20 or 25. And we've mentioned that another time. Yep, so we need to change that. Okay. And then that's just the finished plan with the stock room, the sales room, where they shake up the paint, all that good stuff. So we do recommend approval of SR 2403. However, I do want Jade to come up here and discuss that apron, and I'll go back to that site because they've had some conversations, so.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Good evening, Paul Marcinko, Jade Consulting. I want to thank staff and appreciate the fact that we've gone through multiple revisions with the concept plan and the design to make sure that we satisfied all the comments. We had some cross-access shown along the west side, which would front 181 there. We had then revised that to show this apron on the eastern side, which would connect Lot 4 to our south. We presented that as an option to a potential user to the south, and we just don't believe that it's necessary. They don't need it. We have all intentions of meeting the plat requirements for the maximum number of access points to Bushel Drive. So I guess just the question or the comment is that the site plan you have before you, if we don't build that one apron there, I just wanted to make sure that that's not an issue because it won't be necessary. if we do need it in the future, we could always add it. But I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
What would the apron be used for if it was utilized?
So, and stepping back, there's, within this block, I believe it's lots 2 through 6?
Yes.
Okay, there's a limit of 3 entrances, so every lot doesn't have to, and we wind up with just ingress, egress for the big trucks. There was no restrictions on which lots had those, so there's no requirement to install it here. Jade is maybe not the engineer on all the projects, so we're really leaning on the property owner to coordinate that and make that work. We've seen half a dozen proposals on some of these sites, and nobody's really wanting the cross-access, so if, I'm afraid we're gonna get to a last person in has no access or, and that, then they're gonna be back in trying to amend the preliminary plat. So there's no requirement for this project to provide that cross-access. It's an overall limitation within that block.
How many units are in the block?
2 through 6, lots 2 through 6 can have 3 entrances from
Okay.
Bushel Drive and 1 from,
Lot 2 can have access to Encounter Drive, and Lot 6 can have access to Rockwell Boulevard. So that is currently the plan. If that changes, then there could be some cross-access. I don't really think that's a concern to not build that stub out. I just wanted to bring it up so we weren't locked in to build it, because the last thing we want is to have everything compliant, and then we have this stub out to just nothing, where there could be a tree there could be some bushes or something instead.
Okay. All right, that'll be discussed.
Okay.
At the end, any questions for the developer while he's here? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, this is a public hearing. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody wish to speak to this item? Again, it's the intersection of 181 and 104 on the northeast corner. Oh, it's not a public hearing. Excuse me, site plan review, I take that back. Nobody wants to speak anyway, so we're good either way. So, commissioners, we have the one issue with the apron, and we have a staff recommendation on this item. What are y'all's thoughts?
and I would like to make at least one, I don't think it has to be a condition. If we're going to remove that apron, I would like to see the revised landscape plans before we get it in front of our city council. That's a recent change, so if we're going to remove that, what does it replaced with?
Yeah, I appreciate the desire for connectivity, but if they're not going to use it, and if it's, on them to figure it out, I'd rather see landscaping.
All right, you can make that in the form of a motion if you like.
I move that we approve SR 2403 with staff conditions and the condition that the apron be allowed to be removed, but another review
A revision of the landscape.
revision provided to staff
Landscape revision.
of the landscape plan prior to going to council.
I'm looking at Chris
Is
on
that
that.
too awkward of a recommendation?
Yeah, well, and just to be clear too, you're just making a recommendation, it's going to city council, so,
Okay. I'm moving that we recommend approval with staff conditions, with the stipulation they can remove the apron, but requiring them to provide a revised drawing to staff before it goes to council.
Okay. So we've got a motion to approve, subject to the staff recommendation, with the caveat of allowing them to remove the apron, but showing a revised landscape plan with the apron removed. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion to approve, recommendation to approve passes unanimously. All right, next item on the agenda is SR 2404 Aubergine on De La Mare in downtown Fairhope, looking to add an additional story on top of the building.
Good evening. So this review is going to, or this presentation will encompass SR 24.04, the site plan, and this is 4 units total at the end result for this project. So we also have an accompanying multiple occupancy project, case SD 24.22, which is the MOP or multiple occupancy project for this. So I have one slideshow that goes over all the materials for both cases. And then at the end, I have recommendations based off of each individual case for the commission to vote on. And if at any point you have any questions, please stop me and ask.
Now, which one of these goes to city council?
So site plan review will go to city council. You guys will make a recommendation to city council, just as we did on the previous case for Sherwin-Williams. But the multiple occupancy project review and approval will stop here with the planning commission.
That's all. Okay, thank you.
So this is a request of the applicant, Peter Ferguson and Fairhope Single Tax, for a site plan and multiple occupancy project of the Aubergine Building located at 315 Delamar Avenue. Aaron Collins with SC Civil is the authorized agent, and Larry Smith is the engineer of record with SC Civil. Subject property is Zone B2 and inside the Central Business District. The proposed plan adds 2 residential units with the addition of a second floor. The ground floor is currently 1 retail space and will become 2 retail units. On the screen on the left side, you can see your zoning map, and on the right is the aerial. And just to be clear, this is an existing building, and they are going to be adding a second floor to that existing building. The building's not being removed and built from ground up, essentially just adding a second floor to that top level. There'll be a rooftop gardens for the 2 residential units, and that second floor is not extending the complete footprint of that building. There is part of the first floor roof that will act as a deck of sorts for the 2 residential units on that second floor. And you'll see that in some of the floor plans when we get to it. On the screen is the site plan. Adding the 2 residential units being in the CBD does require 2 parking spaces, 1 parking space for each residential unit. The parking area is located in the back corner of the building, accessed via a private alley that is owned by Fairhope Single Taxed and is utilized by several business owners in there for back-of-the-house items for access and some additional parking that is back there. And again, this would be 2 spaces inside of a garage inside. Here is the first floor plan. You can see the bottom is 2 retail units, and you can see that second, or the 2-car garage located north is to the left side of this page. Point out on this is a good image to see is there's an existing green screen at the top of that page. That area there is an area that is currently used and will be used for trash receptacles for those trash can bins to be held, and they're not sitting out in the alley, sitting out in front of the building in the way or being obtrusive to the eye. The second floor plan is just the floor layout for the 2 additional units. There's going to be an elevator to accommodate ADA access with a stairwell as well to access both units. The left side of your screen, again, is to the north, and you'll see there's 2 roof garden type areas. That area there is the top floor of the existing building. Some of the renderings and elevations of the building once it is complete. There, that is a view looking back towards the west. You can see where that second floor cuts off and provides a deck area for the residential units above. B2 requires a 20-foot setback, being the CBD encourages building to that front setback line. However, this is also an existing building, and the front setback line is not changing with the addition. The building height is at 34.8 underneath the maximum height. Building materials will be the same as the existing structure. The second floor, again, is 2 units. Have separate balconies facing Delamar coming in. Those balconies were looked at for accordance with our right-of-way ordinance and do not protrude more than 4 foot out in accordance with that. The sidewalks, the existing sidewalks will remain. Any sidewalks that are damaged will be repaired during construction. And then a proposed road cut to get some of the additional utilities through there, similar to a comment that we made during the utility review, is that Delamar is a newly repaved road. So any road cuts or construction that happens in there will be looked at, and again, could have increased right-of-way permit fees when that time happens. A photometric plan was not submitted. There's no more additional lighting being added. The HVAC equipment will be mounted on the single-story rooftop and screened from the building to the right-of-way. Again, we already talked about the parking. part of which there's also a man door or a pedestrian door that exits out of that garage. The adjacent property owner is John Bethay, and he will grant a 3-foot easement into the rear for that. There's also, that 3-foot easement is needed for some utilities that are mounted on the rear side of that building for access to get to those utilities. And garbage will be collected in that green screen. Stormwater and drainage. Stormwater runoff is not increased with this development. The downspouts will be redirected into that alley. We've been told it's a inverted crown. That water gets out to Delamar and continues in its existing path as it does now. The signage is not changing. Erosion control, most of the work is all internal or above. There's really no dirt work or anything being exposed, so we do not have a B&P plan, but appropriate measures will be taken if there is any type of construction, especially when they go through the right-of-way work to increase the utilities. Utility plan submitted and reviewed has all been approved. Each unit will have its dedicated electric meter. A right-of-way permit, again, will be submitted, and that permit will be approved to verify all of the final details. The water services will be added, and there is existing sewer, electric, water, gas, and fiber optics immediately in that vicinity. The ADA requirements are met for the ground level of the retail units, and an elevator being installed meets the ADA for residential units on the second floor. This review did not trigger a traffic study. Staff's recommendation is approval for case SR 24.04 with the following conditions: that they draft and record with Baldwin County Probate an ingress, egress, and utility easement from John Bethay and provide a recorded copy of said easement to planning and zoning prior to applying for a building permit. Staff's recommendation is conditional upon, for SD 24.22, with the following condition: that they draft and record with Baldwin County Probate an ingress, egress, utility easement from John Bethay and provide a recorded copy of said easement to planning and zoning before applying for a permit. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those on behalf of staff. SE Civil, Aaron Collins, and Larry Smith both are with us this evening. Can answer questions on behalf of the applicant. I believe the applicant is with us this evening as well, if there are any particular questions that pertain to them individually.
All right, thank you, Mike. Any questions for staff at this time? All right, thank you. Larry, do you have anything to add at this time?
I'm just here if y'all have any questions for me. He did a thorough job, so I'll let y'all.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question. One of the things about the fire flow, it said that, and I guess this was done back when we were having the water, the emergency issue, and they weren't doing fire flows. It said it was historical data. How historical is the data? How far back? When was that test done, do you know?
I believe it was about a year and a half old.
Okay.
If anything, it's probably better with all the improvements
Well,
that
that's
have
what I
happened
was-
in the
yeah.
area. So I wasn't too concerned, but we'll gladly schedule
No,
another fire
that's fine.
flow
Because I know we made some pretty good improvements in that area, but I didn't know if we were talking 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
or, because we've had some buildings upgraded and some other things done
Yeah.
there. Okay,
I mean, we'll gladly run another one. We're up against the
Sure.
watering ban, so.
sure, no problem.
Hey, Larry, did I remember that this building was originally built to add another story on top of it?
I will let Mac answer that.
I was just curious. I mean, when I looked at the picture, I thought, wait, what's the difference here? And the second story goes on the first story so well, it took me a double glance to figure out what the change was, which is, I think, some pretty good architecture there. It looks great.
The original building, Mac Walcott, Wave Architects, was done in the early 90s, and the original owner had intention of an apartment up top. So the front third of it is designed for a second floor, and our structural guys are working now about what we'll have to do to the rest of it to beef it up for that.
I see.
So, but the intent is to make it look like it's a bigger version of the original design, so.
Looks fantastic. It really, it took me 3 looks to say, oh, there's another story on top. Thank you. All right. So we're just taking right now, we are looking at SR 2404, Commissioners. Any questions for staff or the developers? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we recommend approval to the city council, case SR 24.04, subject to staff recommendations.
Second?
Do I have a second? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously.
And before we get to the, I would like to, just, sorry we missed this, and this is just a formality. We like taking the MOPs and site plan reviews at the same time, but the site plan moves forward to council. So just in case council were to deny something, we don't want to have a lingering, so I'd like to add a condition to the MOP that you're about to vote on, that the site plan is approved by the city council. Like I said, don't foresee any problems, but just a formality to make sure we can continue accepting both of these concurrently.
Okay, thank you, Hunter. This one's not a,
Public hearing.
yeah, this was not a public hearing either. This is a public hearing. Okay. All right. Do you have anything else to add on this one, Mike, before I open the public hearing? All right. I assume you don't, Larry, so I'll go ahead and open anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? All right. If not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Staff, we've now got 2 requested recommendations. If there are no more concerns or questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we approve SD 2422 with staff's recommendation and the approval of the added recommendation that city council approves.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Chris, are you, I see you're nodding your head.
Yeah, it's-
Always makes me nervous.
It was a yes, it wasn't a no.
Okay. Good, nodding's good then, shaking's bad, all right. Okay. In that case, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is ZC 2406, East Lake Village.
And we skipped item J. There was a lot of feedback, kind of wanting to know what that was about. We're coming back. It's administrative. It's more about the agendas and applications. We're not adding any substantial changes. So to jump in, CZ 24.06, this is a request from 181 Fairhope Avenue for approximately 76 acres. You will be familiar with the property. It is currently known as the Clump PUD. This would be a new PUD known as East Lake Village PUD. The Niket Architecture and Design is a member of the team, and SE Civil as well are authorized agents. In general, there are 610 dwelling units with almost 2,010 gross square feet of commercial space. Within that commercial space is a 130-room hotel. The adjacent properties, and I'm kind of shift over here. On the right-hand side kind of shows you the jurisdictional changes. So anything white is in the county. So it is county's own property to the north and to the east. We have residential R2 and RA to the west, and R2 and a small little bit on the at the intersection there of B2, which is our more intense commercial zoning. This former project had a combination of multifamily, and I don't think we put that on the slides, but it was multifamily, commercial, and your traditional kind of out parcel commercial, as well as a small area for convalescent nursing home on the third lot. What we're looking at now is more in line. I'm going to jump around just a second. So I'm going to jump to the comprehensive plan. The 2016 plan is on the left. And as most of you know, this is a commercial node as defined in the 2016 comprehensive plan. I'm sorry, this was a village node. The difference was a little bit of how to develop instead of that being a more general commercial node with vehicular-oriented projects. It was to create village at this intersection. And on the right-hand side is the preferred land use plan that's in our current proposed comprehensive plan. We're not utilizing some of the same language, but we are still recognizing that as one of the more intense nodes and what we're kind of shifting, because up until this project, we really didn't have any projects coming in and utilizing those village district standards. So here we are, quite a few years later, haven't seen that. And there's multiple reasons, I think, for that. Some we'll talk about even in this project. But what we're shooting for is, as y'all have been reviewing the draft, is more of a place type approach that has some design guidelines. It's a little easier to know what to do on the front end. Those are going to focus on things like how do buildings front the streets, how do, picking what paint colors or things like that. But that's what we'll be proposing. But those will be a follow-up and have their own gnashing of teeth and long reviews through both the Planning Commission and City Council to adopt those as regulations. So we don't see that being a very short-term solution to come up with those regulations. Now kind of coming back, and this is probably
But they already exist for the village district.
for the village districts, there are standards and guidelines. There absolutely. So I think that's a great point. We have some standards today, and we may have some standards down the road that may be slightly different, but that has not worked its way. We don't even have the comprehensive plan approved yet to move into that regulatory revision phase. And just for I think Mobile just finished theirs this past year, and it took 7 years to work through the amendments of the zoning ordinance and kind of getting those. So I hope we don't take 7 years, but it is a lot to amend. But this is roughly the proposed plan. As you see in your packet, there's quite a few sheets. They're each labeled individually to try to focus on one singular item, and you'll see those as pedestrian plans, circulation plans, height density plans, green space plans. This is just a general to kind of bring us up to speed on what's being proposed and the number and kind of unit distribution. So in general, the attempt was to utilize the village standards. Now, what we're seeing is a PUD. So the village standards and then what exceptions to those standards would be in the PUD. And essentially, we're splitting this into two pieces in this proposal. The CVC is where the core of a village is. It's the commercial village center. And then there's the village residential mix. So we'll see some of those, and you see those divisions in your plans. Now, one of the challenging things for us to review in this was, are we reviewing it versus those village standards or just a PUD that's coming in and being able to evaluate that? So, that's kind of what we're saying here. There's 3 of those zoning districts in the village standards. And those are laid out in the City of Fairhope zoning ordinance. And then there's the PUD, which I want to emphasize, in 2020, we amended the PUD requirements. There was quite a few PUDs that just had minor changes, like smaller lot sizes. And there was a discussion of we don't need so many PUDs. It needs to be unique, and we added certain things like building elevations, materials for hardscapes, trails, and sidewalks, landscape plans, figuring out what the character of the common areas. All of those were important things we added to a PUD application. And at the end of the day, on this application right now, that's one of the biggest hurdles. We don't have those details because I think the goal is to keep a lot of flexibility in this proposed project. So not knowing what it is, there's a lock. How do you provide these details? And I think the village district, at least in some of our recommendations, the village district offer that flexibility, but it has some requirements that at the end of the day is where some of those changes were, and is that following the Fairhope regulations and what we want to see? And frankly, I think this just came more than just staff need to be involved in this conversation. So what we're going to do here is kind of give you a little bit of where the differences are This is the plan that shows the building height and density. This kind of darker orange color is where we kind of exceed our current standards. So 35 feet is the current village district standards for the highest buildings. There's some lower requirements, but 35 feet is where it currently is. And that also, when those were written, you are allowed a little bit more building height because the definition of building height changed. So while it says 35 feet, the impact is you can average it's to the mean roof. So there's actually a taller building when that was allowed. But as proposed here in this plan, all of the darker orange is being proposed as three-story buildings with a 50-foot height limit. And then the darker brown, which includes a hotel and 2 apartment buildings, are proposed as 4 stories with a height limit of 65 feet. So that's one of the obvious changes to the current regulations. And this plan kind of shows you that line of where the CVC roughly and the village districts are. We've got some challenges with that. The village districts are really intended, if you look at it, before you get into buildings, it's really about the blocks and lots and how those are created. So those regulations are a lot of times written for having a lot within a block and you're applying setbacks, some of those things. That makes it kind of challenging because this boundary really doesn't follow any traditional lot and block. There's a large lot with multiple components on it. So again, hard to go back and review village standards when the lot and block's not created to that, exactly to that standard.
Did they ask you guys to review it with village standards, or are you just trying to be helpful and show how it might
No, well, our
comply?
recommendation when we first talked about a project like this was to follow the village standards. So what we, I think there was a few exceptions requested, so it came in as a PUD. And, the walking through this review and trying to get a clear picture of what's being proposed and what's being changed is what we've been working toward. And frankly, we kind of got to, and this isn't a bad thing. It's, especially at a project of this scale, there's a lot of moving parts. And, we're looking at the regulations. If it's a PUD, we need to be able to see those plazas, courtyards. We need to see what the buildings look like. There's elevations required. And when you can't provide those and providing guidelines, then we're going back to a set of standards. So I think early on, we said either you have to replace our standards with something that, it's a regulation. And that's sometimes more challenging to do than just, showing a picture. And you'll see somewhere some of that kind of comes into play. But some of the differences, we've got size setbacks, reduced from 6 feet to 0 feet for 2 family structures. Rear setbacks are reduced from 5 feet from 5 feet from 30 feet for townhomes and multifamily. Increased principal structure coverage, that's 85 instead of 40 to 65%. Larger parking lots, drive-throughs in front of buildings instead of to the side and rear as required in the village districts. Width to height ratios are a little greater, reduced transparency requirements to buildings. And I can't remember that. It wasn't huge, but if it was, I think ground floor had it's like a 10% difference. I can't remember the exact number. If it was 30% requirement, they're proposing 20. So it wasn't that they were ignoring that requirement. It was just a reduction, so that some of those exceptions. Green space is one of those things that we've talked about, the character of green space. There's actually in the village standards, is it civic green space? Is it natural green space? Labeling those and knowing what those are, because while there's an overall open space, green space requirement, there's also in the village standards, within a block, you have to provide a plaza within each block. Either you're connected to a trail and you have to provide this plaza, courtyard, something like that, has a percentage of the block that it has to be. So, where some of these are the pool behind the hotel, it doesn't meet some of those requirements. So asking, what is this being proposed as was kind of one of the challenges. And we've looked at, this kind of evolved from the original plan, and I know sometimes conversations we have early on can influence things along the way. And I want to be completely clear, there was some height. As a planning director, I have an opinion too, and sometimes height doesn't bother me, if done the right way. At this first plan, when we looked at this was kind of the village center, and we looked at a plan. We had a large kind of amphitheater with a stage and hotel here. Now, this plan did not accommodate for drainage. I think this is before the engineer got involved and didn't accommodate. We've kind of got two drainage sheds here that really you have to accommodate for. So as we were looking at, okay, you've got to accommodate that. One of those, even in the village standards, I can't remember the exact name, but there has to be a kind of there's a main desire is to have an anchor building, have a, iconic building that you can work on. So in my mind of that height, the hotel, if there was something there, I might be staying here and supporting height. Ultimately, that's got to go through Planning Commission, City Council. But this was a different scale. Everything was two-story here. It was, a lot fewer units. And it may be that one thing I don't know, from a market standpoint, to get a village like this, it may require this kind of density financially. I did not review this, nor did my staff review this under those components. We were kind of looking at our standards, anything we had to be able to accommodate that. So it may be that's a conversation we need to have. And before anybody spends any more money on this project, we discuss if we're looking to change this, because I do feel like this could be a precedent-setting project as we see other plans that we've longed for, kind of this village design concept for years, and we're seeing more people, willing to accommodate that. So what does it look like? There are some inconsistencies, even taking those exceptions aside, because while there's some listed exceptions, when you really start looking at it, there's a lot more, and I certainly don't recommend that we apply or approve a project that's not clear directions, because every time something comes in and builds, we want a clear answer. They're going to look to us for answers, and what we approve today is going to drag for years. I mean, that's going to be a process. So just a couple of examples. I'm not going to go too much into this, but there's some guidelines within the proposed. There's architectural typologies. I think those are actually pretty good. There's some standards from other places. Now, there's no requirement to utilize those, but even within that, so we're looking, I pulled a little snippet from the Southern Mercantile, this is the buildings around a town center. It says right now to use low-scale two-story buildings. That fits right in with the village districts, but it doesn't fit in with the proposed height plan of 65 feet, 50 feet buildings, 3- and 4-story buildings. So small details. What I want to be looking at, if somebody's proposing a project of this scale, I want to be looking at details, even whether we're looking at buildings or guidelines. Our current regulations or recommendations in the village districts, for example, when it comes to buildings and how they create something dynamic. You've got dimensional requirements to ensure it's not a big monolithic. So 3 or 5 feet out for entrances recessed. And this is a drawing within our zoning ordinance today. This building to the right, the colored image, is not proposed. This is something I found on Google, and somebody may love this. This is a subjective part. But what this was replaced with was something similar that doesn't have those dimensional requirements. It's buildings differentiated by paint color and window treatments. And when you can look here, all of those have a little bit different dormer. They have different paint color. But there's a big difference between these two streetscapes. So I want to make sure what we're actually approving and need to have something. And right now, we just don't have that comfort level that we know what's being proposed, other than, I think, keeping the ultimate flexibility of having 65 feet, smaller setbacks, and you know, the exceptions that benefit the development, not necessarily the long-term goals of the city. So with that said, at this time, we do recommend denial of CZ 24.06. This is a PUD proposed, so it would be a recommendation to the city council ultimately for their final decision.
Okay, thank you, Hunter. Anybody have any questions for Hunter at this time? All right, if not, I will call on the applicant. Do you have a presentation to make at this point?
Evening, Drew Dolan with 68 Ventures. I think we have a separate slideshow to present.
Drew, if you go, do we get a slideshow? Can we plug right in? Up to you. Don't play it from the thumb drive, put it on the desktop. Okay. Did that come in? Oh.
No, we sent one at like 6 a.m. this morning.
Let's see. Straight in the laptop? Okay. There's not a port on that side. Can I take this out? Will things still work? This one? Yeah. All right, arrows back and forth, right, left. You should-
Perfect, thank you, sir. All right, so I think from a high level, our goal when we approached this project was to create a village center mixed-use master plan, really implement some high-end architecture that's pretty unique to Fairhope as a whole, and kind of increase the standard of development. We want it to be very pedestrian-friendly, wide sidewalks, street-lined streets, on-street parking, and have some mixed-use trails as well. Parking lots tucked behind the rear of the buildings so they're not visible from the right-of-ways. Any taller buildings being pushed off of the existing roadways towards the center of the project, and then also preserve mature existing vegetation. So many of those are kind of already innate in the village zoning concept. I'll quickly walk through the master plan. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. In the northeast corner, that's kind of separated off by the wetlands, so it kind of serves as an out parcel, is what it is. In the northwest corner, those lots there are detached, as well as the townhomes. That will all be for sale residential products, so detached cottages, as well as some townhomes. In the center there, off of 181, that is an active adult multifamily product, so 2 larger buildings, as well as the cottages that front 181. Moving towards the south, on the corner there of 181 and Fairhope Avenue, much heavier commercial component, so you have some retail restaurant in there. The orange, as Hunter highlighted, that is more traditional multifamily, but as you see, that's spread out throughout the project with, in my opinion, nice-sized buildings, so very different than your typical kind of garden-style walk-up multifamily that you see at most projects along the Eastern Shore now. The beer garden that's in there, let's see if you can see my cursor. Nope, not in a presentation. Oh, there we go.
You can.
All right, so that's envisioned to be a beer garden, and then this blue building is a hotel. So we really envision this, kind of Hunter mentioned the central hub of a village center. We really envision that being this area right here, the beer garden flanked by commercial. So these multifamily buildings, they all have first floor commercial, so restaurant, retail, as well as this large green space and a hotel that brings a very transient user base. So that really being the energy hub or center of the project. We'll move on. So we got some kind of aerial renderings done to just provide a better depiction of what the project would look like. And to me, one of the best things about this project is the streetscape that it will create along Gayfer 181 and Fairhope Avenue. So instead of being just out parcel, out parcel, out parcel, out parcel, out parcel, as the PUD exists today, we have further here to the north that you can't see, retaining the existing mature vegetation, coming into single-story cottages here, a boulevarded entrance, again, preserving existing mature vegetation, and then as you move south towards Fairhope Avenue, single-story restaurant and retail, which maintains as you go down Fairhope Avenue. So in my opinion, being great stewards of kind of what exists today and our existing right-of-ways. So this is a view of the large central green space. I think this helps gives perspective of the size of it. The green space and then this bandstand over to the north is right at 1.5 acres. And just for context, Fairhope's community park is 2 acres, the entirety of it. And the green space that's there is 7/10 of an acre. The Coastal Community College Amphitheater, where Live at 5 takes place, is 1.75 acres, and a football field, including the end zones, is 1.3 acres. So this isn't just kind of a pocket park. It is, very, very large in scale and a true amenity of the project. Not quite as large, but I think of Railroad Park in Birmingham that, really became a huge amenity to that community, and we envision this doing the same. Again, just another aerial image that looks at the beer garden and then the hotel in the background. So you kind of see the wide sidewalks, streetscape, tree-lined streets. The existing PUD, so, for better or for worse, we're not really starting with a blank canvas here. I know the prior developers of this project, and many of you may be on Planning Commission when this was approved. So nothing against it. I'm a big fan of a lot of the individuals of the prior development group. But in my opinion, this project is not great for Fairhope. I chase my boys all around the county playing different sports and go to OI a good bit. And, I think one of the worst things that could happen to Fairhope is that Highway 181 develop into, something similar to Highway 59 that runs through the south part of the county. And I do think we run the risk of doing that. We've got a lot of commercial out parcels now, the 104 intersection, and if something like this were to come to fruition, that's kind of where we're headed towards. I think change and additional development come along the 181 corridor is inevitable. It's not a bad thing. But we have an opportunity to do something a lot cooler, create a much more enhanced and visually appealing streetscape, which I think is something that our project strives to do. All right, let's see if I have the tech skills to make this happen. Oh, sound.
But we moved here when I was 3, so yeah, this is definitely home to me. The Eastern Shore is our home, it's our backyard. And so some of these more unique mixed-use projects that we're working on, that's why we're starting on them in the backyard, because we care. It means something to us. We live in these communities, so we want to be proud when we walk around. But to do that, you need people living there, right? So you need to have a decent amount of density, a decent amount of residential. You need to have those 3-story buildings to provide that whole feel and that whole ambiance and that whole energy. And then on top of that, just practically to provide that quality of architecture that we're going for, that Niquette's going to design for us. They come down here, they spend time in the market, they have designed, very high-end, very successful projects. They know what to tailor the architecture, the building types to make sure it fits. Because again, we have to make sure this project is successful or it's all for naught.
I do think that there's so much value to what we're doing. It is a place where people outside of our project, acreage, want to come and want to spend time, whether it's shopping, eating, or just hanging out. It really is hopefully bringing an asset to the city.
We're not taking the easy road on this one, right? There is an avenue where we could have gone, where we could do lower density on the residential side, do some super boring commercial out parcels and sell them, hit our double and kind of move on with life. And honestly, as somebody who's from the Eastern Shore, to see the project develop in that manner, it would hurt my heart a little bit, because I think it could be so much more. And despite the fact that we'll face some resistance due to the density of the project, I do think that how we're trying to attack the project is what's best for the community, and long-term will deliver the best value and the best return, not just for 68 Ventures, not just for the residents who live in that community, but for the existing community as a whole.
Quality of life is more important than it's ever been. We want experiences more than we want stuff. What mix of building types might create dynamic, thriving, complementing lifestyle? It's always a combination of what maybe your daily needs would be, mixed with housing choices and types. Really, when you take all those uses and you make them intentionally related, it takes a master plan to think about their interrelated connectivity. And by doing so, the viability that results is even more powerful. When we do that, we give value to a community and a city that transcends any single parcel. And that, in essence, creates an X factor of value. People want to belong to a place. They want to belong to a community. And they tend to identify those spaces and places that are kind of magical, those outdoor rooms, as the center or identity, or where they would put the pin to say, this is where I live.
The long-term kind of value creation that is wrapped around like walkable mixed-use communities far exceeds the way we currently develop. We're well aligned to work on big projects, things that are daring, things that come with some measure of risk. Let's not do it the way we've always done it, because we'll get what we always got, right? Let's show people something new, and let's believe in something bigger.
The currently approved plan, it'll look like a normal townhome community with some out parcels. And being at the core entrance coming into Fairhope, it'd be a disservice to the piece of property to put some commercial out parcel. They deserve to have something cool, something unique, something fun, and something that both we're proud of, Niquette, architects proud of, civil engineers proud of, but also that the community's proud of, and they want to use it as an attraction and amenity for the whole city.
I certainly view this as a project that gives back to the community. There's nothing like this on the Eastern Shore. And so to be able to deliver that to the community and elevate the standard of development, create a phenomenal place for people to live, for people to take their family on a Friday night to enjoy themselves, to walk around outside, to go into restaurants and bars, I think that's wonderful.
So I'll admit, when we put this video together, I was not planning to also present. So you get to see my face more than I'm sure you care to, and more than I like to Hunter referenced it a couple times. the comprehensive plan, both the existing one and the new one that I know is just kind of proposed and not yet adopted, and I won't bore you guys with reading some of these comments. And again, I think at a very high level, our proposed project is, almost perfectly in line with, what is being looked for in a village center that exists at an intersection like Fairhope Avenue and 181. Sure, there's several, in my opinion, innocuous variances, and, height certainly being a material one, but in my opinion, one that, enhances the project by creating variation. I think the new proposed comp plan references, 1 to 3 stories and generally up to 40 feet specifically in there, which I understand that we're proposed above that. That's not lost on me. But do think kind of by and large, we are smack dab, where we want to be there. The other thing I want to mention before I turn it over to Jared to dive into a little bit more details, but one of my favorite things from that video is actually his quote where he said, "Let's not do it the way we've always done it because we'll get what we've always got. Let's show people something new and believe in something bigger." And again, that really is what we're trying to do here. We could do something boring. What's approved, in my opinion, is pretty boring and, a disservice to what could be there. And, we're kind of stepping out on a limb and know that you guys probably have to do as well. But we do want to do something that truly is special and different and increases the standard of development in Fairhope. With that, I will turn it over to Jared to talk about some exciting details.
Good evening, and thank you for taking the time. Jared Calhoun, Principal, Niket Architecture and Design, 2227 2nd Avenue North, Birmingham, Alabama. I think the alignment of this, and I would like to start just saying the village districts are incredibly forward-thinking and progressive. We, at our office, talk a lot about new urbanist kind of philosophy, which is, I think, just urbanist philosophy. It's based on things that we used to do 100 years ago and ways we used to develop. And it's all surrounded kind of community building. And I think the village districts are really trying to communicate that same message. And I think a lot of what's in the comprehensive plan, whether we're calling it a mixed-use center or a village node, is aiming for that same thing. So looking at this plan, it is about on-street parking. It is about street trees. It is about creating like a pedestrian streetscape, a place that is community focused, that offers a variety of residential housing options. And all of that is about trying to create what we call like an 18-hour day. And if you're going to have a mixed-use center that really thrives and flourishes, you need different user groups that are occupying the streetscape and the spaces at different times. And to do that, you need different functions. You need the people that would be in an active adult complex. You need the people that would be in a fee simple kind of family house. You need people that choose to be renters. You need people that are staying for a few days in a hotel. All of those different user groups help support all of the commercial traffic that's on site. So we talk about a lot of variety there, and I think this is all kind of reiterating stuff that's already in the comprehensive plan. As far as the base zoning districts, like Hunter said, we were heavily leaning on the village district and trying to follow those rules as much as we can. And we did have some variances, but I think if you look at a 76-acre property and we're in the low 600s for the density, we're not even talking about 10 units an acre. It's somewhere around 8 if you talk about all of the spread. And what we're asking for, I think, is the ability to direct where some of that goes, to leave space for the beer garden, the public community green. We're trying to turn all of our stormwater management into community amenities, and let's have trails that kind of circumnavigate these ponds. We know they're going to be wet ponds. We can make activities around it. Let's pull away from our western buffer and be sensitive to the residential that's adjacent our property. And all of those things open up kind of ground space that we're not using, and we're giving back to public realm, and that's part of how we're getting to the solution about the height of the buildings that are in the core of this. What you'll notice on the height and density map, and you can see it or feel it a bit in this rendering, is that through conversations with city staff, we were really talking about trying to create a core that's in the center of this, and to let the periphery of it kind of cascade down in height and density to be good neighbors and to better match what's around us. And it also leave in place the existing kind of mature landscaping that does exist along that western border and around some of the wetlands that are on site. The public green, this is where community happens. I think when Ross Bridge, where I live, which is a little T&D in Hoover, was originally planned, I think they had a two-sided kind of commercial street that fronted the main street coming in, and they left the street frontage for a long time as just open space, and it became the area where the farmers market happens, the Christmas festival and the skating rink get put up seasonally, and you'll see people out there doing the group fitness classes during the week, or playing soccer and football with the kids for practice. It becomes that kind of community activated space, and I think it was a big revolt when they said they were going to try and turn it into some more of the commercial street frontage. But I think we're trying to be cognizant of that and provide space for all of that to happen in the way we're planning this proposal. I love this image. It kind of speaks to the nature of the streetscape, and I think we're after the same thing that the village districts are after in creating streetscape and a pedestrian environment, and trying to activate those areas and let this be where all of the community connections happen. Let this be where visitors and residents occupy that kind of sense of third place, right? We all have home as a first place and our work as a second, and then there's the places that we go to spend our time that we call third place, and that's what this is. Green space summaries. We had a lot of conversations surrounding this, that especially as it related to the height of the buildings with staff over the past several months. And this is kind of what Hunter was getting to, about a way to classify and size the areas of open space and green space and plaza, and those to prove that we're trying to meet the intent of the regulations. And where we fall with the densities on both the CVC and the VRM, we would be looking at like a 15%, I think, requirement across the site for open space. And currently, and this doesn't include wetlands, and it includes like 30% of the wet ponds, but we're at 27%. So if you look at the wetlands added into that, some of the construction setbacks that I don't believe are in this, and those things, we're probably north of 30%. Just generally open space that's left to public realm. This is a small connectivity map. I think some of this was always going to be required through village districts, and some of it is us trying to think through how the community would function and what the connectivity would be. And I guess this is the piece that's important for us to communicate, that wouldn't be necessarily regulated by any of the village district stuff, but us trying to think about how people walk around, how they would move, how they would utilize the site, and trying to provide a lot of walkability and encourage that activity for residents and visitors. Now we get to the height. And these are just some simple diagrams on places where like the height would restrict what we're trying to do and why. With our two-story buildings, this is a little two-story building in Trilith. That was a kind of a common touch point when we were having conversations with staff. So I'm using examples from there as a part of this presentation. But this is a two-story commercial building in the upper left corner. And, this is obviously easily adjusted, but that's 36 feet at the ridge line on a two-story building. And below it is a three-story kind of walk-up residential building. And you can see this is 47 feet. And this could pinch down, but it's really about the roof form that is part of the big request for the height here. If you look at the height, 12 feet, 10 feet, we're underneath the 35 feet, just barely. But, you're underneath it in the occupiable space of the building. And what is exceeding that is really just giving us an allowance to make the building architecture feel good. Like we want to be able to have residential roof forms, and as well as kind of the parapeted Main Street buildings as a way to give variety to the community. So some of these requests are to that end. On the upper right, three-story mixed-use building. I think we would be in the same place as the previous example, the walk-up building with this. It just, generally speaking, anytime we're putting commercial space on the ground floor of a building, you almost always end up with a taller story there. So some of the request and why we're trying to do that is to allow for functional space for the retailers, and that's somewhere between 16 and 20 feet, generally speaking. Taller for the F&B and probably shorter for your general kind of retailer space. But that's how these buildings function, and it's a bit why we're asking for you to work with us on the heights that we're going to allow. Height and density map. Like I said, all of the perimeters you'll see on the edges of the site are generally 1 and 2 story. I think the closest thing we get is where we touch with some of the multifamily along Fairhope, and we have one building that's 3 stories there. And then you'll see that the buildings largely clustered in the center are the 3 and 4 story buildings, and that's meant to create that street. It's part of the streetscape, and it's also part of the I know where I'm going. It's part of wayfinding that we're locating the density all in the center, and that kind of directs people where to go. It also frames the street, the beer garden, the public green. Having defined edges is what makes a lot of these outdoor rooms feel appropriate, feel like comfortable. So we always are trying to do that as well. And the bigger the space is, like the green, the taller the buildings need to be to frame it. That's a function of the planning here, but it is part of the reason that we're showing it the way we are. And I think the 2 buildings that are on the active adult, these don't have that same tall commercial story. These buildings could be 55 feet in reality, even with the roof form. And the one that we actually are proposing that probably needs the height is the hotel, because it'll be largely commercial space in the lobby and the included commercial on the ground level. Hunter had mentioned some of the setbacks varying from what's in the current village district. And I think we've worked through a bunch of that, and this is maybe the clearest example of where we're not. The 30-yard rear setback on a townhouse is, to me, creating kind of a suburban model where you have a detached garage and a small rear yard, and then you have a townhouse that fronts the street. And trying to keep the urban form and have these alleys served, we just don't have that rear yard space and the detached garage. And I think we're trying to allow that outdoor space to be the front stoop, the front yard, and in order to create amenity, like shared common space that you see in the center of this block. So I think all of the variance requests we're asking for are things that maybe just haven't come up because the village districts have not been utilized to date. Parking variance, the size of the lots. I think this is
a result of the lot size and the building sizes. And I think that we're trying to hide all of the parking and create the streetscape and line the perimeter of the blocks with the buildings and push all of the parking internal, which to me is kind of the spirit of the district. And I think the fact that we're asking for a little higher count is also congregating these and trying to keep the development as compact as we can. I don't know if I really want to speak to this one, but I think we can all agree that the value to the community, to the residents, and to the city is way higher if we can get to something like this versus where we are. That is it. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for the developer at this time? All right, I'll go ahead and open the
I
public.
have a question. I
Yes,
just,
sir.
this division into CVC and VRM, what's that based on? I mean, it looks arbitrary to me.
We were trying to concentrate the commercial node on the intersection of Fairhope and 181. And we knew that we had to catch the street frontage, especially on the north end where we have the commercial out parcel. So I think the frontage along Highway 181 all became part of the CVC, and the frontage along Fairhope Avenue became almost entirely CVC. And then the rest was based on uses and distribution on site.
Because, I mean, the divisions don't, I don't know if the divisions don't match up with your phasing either. You're putting a whole bunch of apartments in the CVC that look like they really should be in the VRM. But is that a density thing and getting around the density for VRM?
No, sir. I think it may change the density category in the VRM. If we were to switch where things are included, it may change the mix of uses. I think we were trying to keep most of the single-family detached, the townhomes, and the 1 and 2 family in the VRM. And the townhomes were a piece that were kind of flexible and accommodated in both districts. And then anything that had real commercial space in the building was just going to have to be part of the CVC, as it's not allowed in the VRM. That was some of the logic behind why we were drawing the line where we were.
Okay. Any other questions for the developer at this time? All right, if you'll stay up front, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing and then close that. Anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? And again, we'll just make a recommendation to the city council. Mac, come on up. And that's Mac Walcott. You do have to say your address because I don't know that, Mac.
So I've been.
What is your address, Mac, the secretary has to?
12330 Live Oak Street, Fairhope. Thank you. I've been, when I first saw this in the paper, I've been watching it, and the discussion tonight was interesting to me because it brought up the current comprehensive plan that has the village nodes. That those of us that have been around a while, we've noticed that the intent of that has not come forward for many years, that idea has been in place. And instead, we see what we saw tonight, the development of 181 and 104, that kind of development there. So I'm fascinated by the quality and the intent of this, and I think, as I remember the village concept, it was intended to induce the developer to work with the city to produce the guidelines were intended to induce the developer to work with the city to come up with something that met that. So I hope this can go forward, and I think it's so, I mean, the comparison of this plan versus the PUD that's already approved is, to me, tells the story right there about what I think probably a pretty good team can do with cooperation with the city. So I hope it can go forward, and I'm pretty excited about it because, I mean, that's what all these years we've talked about village nodes. This is it. I mean, this is pretty exciting. So I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody else from the public wish to speak to this item? In that case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Turn the meeting over to the commissioners. I tell you, I don't have any issues with the plan overall as far as if it looks like you show it's going to look. However, my big concern, you know, Mac has been around this town as long as I have, and I've been on this board for 25-plus years. And I have seen all sorts of pictures of beautiful buildings. And I have seen all sorts of beautiful PUDs. And I'm yet to see the 24 tennis courts at Battles Village, or the racquetball courts, or the 2 Olympic swimming pools and the adult lap pool. You know, the property near y'all's, a recent PUD we didn't even come at all close to what the PUD showed that it looked like. And when I look, and I agree with Mac, if it was done as pretty and as kumbaya as y'all's video showed, I'd be very, very pro. But what my concern is when I look at statement F, intent to sell, and I see all of this, and, you know, with staff, nothing has been put down to where, you know, we know what any faces are, you know, we have very little guarantee that what is presented here is what's going to be here, other than the density and the layout as far as the building plans, the attractiveness, and so forth. You know, we don't have any of that, and that is my big concern. I don't think personally that with the detail that the city has right now, that I could propose that this be, that I could make you know, my vote to the city council to approve this. If we had a lot more guarantees and detail that this is where the buildings will be and this is what the buildings will look like. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love all these pictures you have in here. I've seen them, you know. I've been to a lot of these places. A lot of these pictures are out in the country. But my biggest concern is we approve this and it gets flipped to somebody else, and all we get out of this is the apartments and the density, and we don't get the attractiveness. And where if this is, you know, I would like to put this more back on you all to come back to the city staff. If it's just me, I'm just one vote for one recommendation to city council. Who knows what they would like to do and what their pleasure will be. But my suggestion for my approval recommendation would be to go back and work with the city staff and give them guarantees that what you all have on paper will carry over regardless of who ultimately owns this property.
I'd like to second that, and just to coin a phrase, trust but verify.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that you're on to something. I like a lot of your concepts. But, you know, we get brought a lot of really pretty stuff that doesn't turn out that way. And unfortunately, we're a little jaded. So when you assume something, you know what that makes out of you. So I think if you could go back and collaborate a little bit more and get a lot of these just discrepancies finalized with some details that's in writing to us, I think I would be happy to see something else.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I won't restate it as much, except I have to say what Art always said is you can't do for one what you won't do for another. So if we make exceptions without knowing that you guys will design this or who will eventually own it, that exception could, you know, really go horribly wrong. Just the thing that seems to be muddying the waters is it a village district or is it a PUD? And you know, and I saw somewhere in there, well, we don't want to, I mean, it's a very clear requirement of a PUD that you have building elevations and you show what the buildings look like and you show landscape plans with materials of what's And you know, that's what makes Railroad Park and not just a field is the design. We all get that that's an expensive venture to do for 75 acres. So the alternative is it's a village district and you don't have to show all that. You just say it's a village district. I guess in terms of the collaboration that we're encouraging, if there were a PUD that had hewed very closely to the village district and maybe had like a couple of highlighted exceptions and a reasoning that maybe is a way that village district evolves into a more usable district. You know, I don't necessarily think the requirements of a village district are the reason it hasn't been used. I just think nobody's been forced to do it. And so if there's an available alternative to do the easy way out and put a gas station, somebody's gonna do that. And I really appreciate everything y'all are saying and some of the images that sound like a village district. So I would love to see you go all the way and make a village district.
Yeah. Well, in the village districts, you know, I think one of the difficulties with them is the financing. You know, the multifamily is by far the easiest to finance. And, you know, everybody wants the AIBs before the commercial comes in. But again, we have learned, you know, we learn from the lousy developments, not the great ones. And, you know, we have had a number that have changed hands, and the photos and all the guarantees that we had up front from people that, you know, I knew my whole life, you know, locally that, you know, sold them to this person or that person, nothing against the people, nothing done wrong, nothing nefarious or anything. But just, you know, we got a great proposal, and then when it came to, you know, the financing and the modalities of borrowing money and spending money and making the numbers work, the properties got flipped to somebody else. And just what we were shown, and I could get Hunter to bring you just volumes and volumes of books and compare them to what's on the street, and they're just not anywhere similar. And so, you know, I would love to see y'all withdraw this and go back to the city staff and make them feel very comfortable that, you know, all of the, you know, beautiful ideas and modern, you know, streetscapes that I loved the pictures of and all. Of course, I noticed at the very end as it started to come up and we were going to see the 3D vision, it then poofed and disappeared away. And I'm scared that in real life that vision might poof and disappear and go away. And that's why I don't, you know, support it until we have more guarantees in the drawings that what y'all have here, that we're going to get more than just the height and the density. You know, this is more height than we have ever approved for anybody, and as much density as would have ever approved for anybody. And just with those, you know, heavy exceptions, you know, I'd want some pretty heavy guarantees that you know, y'all's vision is going to be followed up with the details. You know, Frank Lloyd Wright says the beauty is in the details and God is in the details, and just those details are elevations and you know, how the buildings work together. And I mean, some of the ideas that you have of not having 30 feet back there, I've got no problem with a lot of issues like that, as long as, you know, we see those and how it's going to work, and, you know, where that person's third car might be parked and so forth.
Going through, I think it was one of my comments early on. I look at it from a construction standpoint. It's absolutely lovely, and I love the overall concept. I don't know how much I like the number of units and everything there, but one of the things I'd ask for is, you know, how easy would it be to just do a quick guess on what kind of water usage we're talking about? Because we just built a new 1 million-gallon water tower to try to relieve on our system, and it would be kind of unfortunate to turn around and give all that to a single development. I mean, I've been here 16 years. Lee's been here longer. I don't recall anything this big in my 16 years coming here. And so, and especially with everything else we've got, because looking at this, aside from the smaller kind of single-family stuff on the north side, everything in there is going to have a sprinkler system. I mean, that entire site, every building, everything you've got. And I would just be curious if it, you know, what kind of upgrades would be required to make sure that we can provide potable and fire protection to a development this big from a construction standpoint. So, that was one of my questions early on, just kind of wanting to know how, if we could get some of that information, because that's something, sure, you follow what's going on in town. Everybody's asking about infrastructure, and we're spending millions on infrastructure, but we also hadn't had anything this big come in. So we want to make sure that that's not being set back what we're trying to get ahead because of a single development.
We gotta do like a lot of the facing toward 181, agree with, what Mac Walcott says, and a whole lot of positives with this.
Yeah.
Would y'all want us to go ahead and vote at this time? We could hold it over to next month, or we can vote right now. Absolutely, go ahead, yes, sir.
Again, don't disagree with what a lot of you guys are saying regarding the unknown architecture, and you guys kind of hit some of the pain points for us and just the cost of coming up with elevations, particularly given the number of different building types that we have that is a huge plus and kind of drives the character of this, makes that issue that much more challenging to address. I mean, there are very few building types that are the same. Some of the multifamily, would be similar, but there are a ton of different building types on here that makes it challenging to go address all of the different elevations, and we tried to attack that via the design guideline book. I know in kind of coordination with staff that had worked on some bigger mixed-use projects like that in the past. That's how they had seen that addressed, and that's not exactly where we are, but we're relatively close. And so that design guideline book is a part of the PUD submittal, so it's a part of the zoning, so there are teeth in there that hold us to that. Now, that doesn't give you a picture of this is what this building is going to look like, but it does govern the architecture that we have to conform with. I think maybe it was kind of comment F in there with who the owner is or developer. Just, I guess, address that just kind of on what our intent is. So I think the good thing about this is that our plans for the initial phase is master infrastructure, right? So the public roadways, get those in along with the stormwater ponds in the public park. So that goes in, so the character from that standpoint is kind of locked in for phase one. Next that follows that, you referenced it, I had to think a little bit for AID, that didn't come to mind immediately, but I caught on. It likely would be the multifamily, but I think the positive of that is that this building right here, this building right here, and this building right here are all first floor commercial. So you've got 35 to 40,000 square feet of restaurant retail that goes in with the multifamily. So it is not just a way for us to backdoor a multifamily project as a part of this. You would have this, 1.5 acre park in, and you would have 35 to 40,000 square feet of commercial that are going in with the multifamily. 68 Ventures would run point on the multifamily component of the project. We would develop the single family lots. That would also be one of the initial phases. We would sell those lots, likely to a number of different home builders to do custom cottages. And then obviously this commercial out parcel is kind of initial phase. We talk monthly with a development group out of Birmingham to do the active adult multifamily. We don't know at 68 Ventures anything about the active adult multifamily space. You guys had some great sayings, and ours is kind of, do what you know and don't get too far over your skis or you'll get humbled pretty quickly. And so if everything could work out, and I don't mind disclosing who it is because they're not committed to anything yet, but are very interested in being in Fairhope in a Class A project, and that's Corporate Realty. Again, the challenge on something like that for us is it's hard to get someone to sign on the dotted line until we've got something, hard. Same with a lot of the restaurant retail users. Until you've got something real, You can't go get someone, a brewery, to come and sign up to operate a beer garden. So it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg there. And then one of the other comments was just the village district versus the PUD. So, right, this is a PUD, and again, I kind of addressed the elevations component of that. But what we tried to do was highlight base zoning, if base zoning was village, and we have only kind of a handful of deviations from the village zoning that we think enhance the project, and then come in with the design guidebook that provides those teeth on what the architecture needs to look like, was the way that we wanted to address it, because you've got the village zoning guidelines that are already in place and sort of approved, and then we have these small handful of variances, so we're not too far from that, and maybe that gives some comfort in where we're gonna land. But again, understand where you guys are coming from. I think we would request that you guys table it, and we'll work with city staff to come up with the best plan.
I think that would be great, and it may not be that you have to initially do all the elevations. I mean, it may be that, you have some, that y'all voluntarily give, a little bit more, latitude down the road if Chris has, no issues with it, that, in some of the later approvals in the subdivision areas, that some of the elevations could be approved, in those areas later on, and maybe we have a little bit more, teeth in those phases that we, wouldn't necessarily have, something creative like that.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, because no doubt for us, probably the easiest path is going village zoning, but this project, going straight village, to me, it's still cool, a lot cooler than what we got, but it's not this cool for sure.
Sure.
And so we're trying to kind of thread the needle there on what's the best route to go. This is the best
and Hunter
project
can-
as a whole, but
and
it's
Hunter, in
tough
a
to get there.
meeting, I'd be glad to attend a meeting if y'all want to, meet together. We can give you, in that meeting, more kind of a working point of where those issues are.
Sure.
That, in the past, we've been burned by, that we like, some guarantees on.
Yep, absolutely.
And just, I think you can see some of the guidelines, and that was kind of a debate. Do we put that in? Do we not? I think the guidelines actually have some good components to them. But when we get, and when one of the requests, how do we ensure there is a diversity of architectural styles, things like that? And we've got a pattern book, and not one time is the guidelines referenced. I think Lane Park, I'm familiar with that. Is this type had to be used in this space. And breaking those spaces up. You don't have to know what the building is going to be, but at least, when you look at that block around the town center, you've got a hotel and multifamily buildings. And I believe the ground floor is half commercial, half
We switched to full.
full? Okay, good. So but you're kind of doing a monolithic building, so what is the space breakup? What's the dimensions? And then it has to be this type and has to be certain, that kind of guidelines gives a little bit of flexibility, but still locks in some things that we know and we can say in the future, you have to meet these things. That's one of the key things that I stated in the first, one of our first meetings. It's not the guidelines that really, make sure that things are done that way. It's the kind of the form-based codes that we're debating even in our own city. And Rebecca certainly, and I think Eric, we've sat and had meetings about those and what do we do there? But that's like 20 feet. If you've got a building taller than 20 feet, it's got to step back 3 feet, or, whatever those are. That gives it the form without getting into paint colors and wrought iron. So I think there's some opportunities there. And Lee, I think you're spot on. The thing that worries, we're getting 65 feet, and it may be nobody in this room is here when it comes in. So it's 65 feet of something we don't want to see. So if that 65 feet can be punted, until we actually can review those, and I do worry a little bit about that precedent. I want some feedback there. What do y'all think? Because the challenge for us, we sit and talk about the 40-foot mark in the CBD monthly. and with different projects. It's going to be the same thing. If we go to a 65 feet, that's going to be all we hear. I mean, so, you know, if we're okay with that, then we need to be okay with that with other projects, because I think we're
Or have
gonna get
enough
more traction.
or have enough architectural caveats of exactly, you know, why we're allowing this to be 65 feet because of A, B, C, D, and E, and here's what you're getting. Because a lot of times, you know, when we have PUDs, you know, it's like, what does a PUD mean? Just, you know, how many more potatoes can we stuff in that bag? You know, it's not, you know, we want something unique. It's just we want a lot smaller lots. And so it's just, you know, we would need, you know, some architectural caveats and some, you know, kind of, when we make the motion, Chris likes to say we are approving this because of the city's, you know, and the city, not us. It's not Hunter. It's you and your parents and me and my parents and my kids. The city is getting this extra walkability and view, et cetera, because of A, B, C, and D. And then it's not like every time somebody brings a 65-foot building to us, we've got to say, cheers, here you go.
Yeah, I have to say, that's not one of the things I like about this project, is that precedent. There's so much, you know, is that a do or die aspect of it?
Honestly, the 4-story is not. I think one thing that is a lot closer to do or die is when you do those first floor commercial with a second and third retail above.
Retail?
It is. 35 feet is really tough then, because you can't have a 9-foot first floor restaurant. You just can't.
You mean residential above?
Correct. Then
Okay.
you just have two feet in between, so that gets really tough.
Yeah.
You know, 4 stories is not, so maybe we can make things a little easier there. But on those, just the mixed-use buildings that I think are really core to a village plan, particularly surrounding that kind of the hub, it gets really, really tough to maintain that level of character within that.
Yeah, in those cases, those few, we might, you know, want some more guarantees on the architecture.
And I think
or
we're
something like
also, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe talking apples and oranges a little bit, that Hunter flagged. You're really talking to the median roof height, where I think we're talking total max height. Is that correct? Yeah. So maybe if we start talking y'all's language, those come down a little bit, and the variances request on height get a little bit less as well.
Okay.
And I think, I mean, you know, there is the long-range plans here for the villages. It complements the CBD. Doesn't compete, it complements. So
Yeah.
one of the height limits there is that 40 feet, you know, that is to the top of everything. And everybody that's designing in the CBD has that challenge. So complementing versus, you know, do we look, if we go more in the new villages, do we increase that in our core, the heart of Fairhope? So just food for thought.
All right, well, commissioners, do I have a motion to table till next meeting?
We're gonna need a little bit more time the next meeting, because we're already halfway through. So if it's okay, we get together and shoot for, if you're gonna table and everyone's okay with it, let's
Okay.
shoot for the
Yo.
December meeting. Because this is a large project, figuring out how,
Okay.
you know, we're a couple of weeks away from getting reports out for
I think that's
November.
probably appropriate as well.
All right, in that case, with the developer's consent, do I have a motion to,
I move we table ZC 24.06 East Lake Village PUD until the December meeting.
do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. That is the end of our agenda, except somebody told me that somebody at the end of the road down there might want to have some comments on the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
If
Yeah,
not, we
I
can get
do.
out right now.
That's fine.
Here, pass this down to Eric Cortinas,
No,
please.
I'm all good. I'm good.
And notice some of it's already in the bottom
No, it's all
now,
good.
so you got half.
I hear you.
I appreciate all your tabs.
I had fun. I mean, my wife came in the other day and asked me, "What are you reading?" I said, "Honey, I'm doing my homework."
Yeah, you want to read it too?
You want to read it with me?
In that case, I'm not gonna read it in the meeting, I'm just gonna say, well, what do you think about it down there? Yeah, I concur.
Yes, well, and not just to put Eric on the spot, but the, I mean, we, really any feedback that any comp plan went out. We do, because of the Restore project and the timeline, we have every intent to be back in front of you next month to adopt the comprehensive plan. It is a living document, so just if something comes up, we need to change things, we can amend things, but we gave it last month, so here's the chance. Any feedback that we need to discuss and we can amend before we get here next month. That's what we're here for, agenda item.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a copy of this tomorrow too, by the way.
Okay.
You don't have to call me, you don't call me anything ugly. No, a couple of things. It talked about flood zones in there a few times. You and I have never sat down and talked. There is a development section in the flood damage prevention ordinance that talks about setbacks, and it talks about areas around developing around floodplains. And like one of the things our ordinance does, which FEMA would actually allow, is we prohibit any kind of habitable buildings in a floodway. You can technically get a no-rise and build a habitable building. We don't allow that. So I want to make sure, I'll get that to you tomorrow, because that was part of the state model ordinance that we had to adopt, and there's a section in there about development regulations around floodplains, and it was referenced a couple of times in here, so
Yeah.
I want to make sure
And
you see it.
We knew we had it. There's a matrix at the end with things to do, and sometimes it's just, hey, make sure we're looking at this, and you with a building code, you're staying on top of some of those things that, you know, because I think that was early on, some of those components that were put in. So great feedback.
No, and on the design standards, it talks about a technical design review committee. Now, I know this is a guidance document. Are those actual, because that would have to be done with a formal committee to be able to, is that something we're looking to do? And that's just a question.
So part of this, we hired a team, and they're making some recommendations to the city overall. So a lot of that came through, you know, the reviews, and we've talked a little bit about what that looks like. You know, there is a potential, okay, for a committee that could review things like signage, buildings, historic, especially now that we have a historic, you know,
Right.
you know, that can look at some of those things and be a recommendation type, not a regulatory that gives a green light, red light, green light, but kind of, we've got a lot of talented people in town, so if there was some kind of a formal way to accomplish that.
Well, even for like form-based kind, I mean, not that it would be form-based, but if you had them before they came to us, and a committee that could say, hey, if you did this and this and this, your building might be a lot more attractive.
Absolutely.
You know, I might take that as some free architecture advice if it was at the right time in a project I was doing.
But we don't need to be in the business of giving free architectural advice. And I'm not saying that as an architect, I'm just saying, like, that's not what we do, you know, but.
I'm not trying to take business away from you, I'm talking about those, you
That's
know,
not what I'm saying.
the Sherwin-Williams kind of building like we saw today.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything right or wrong about it, but like if they could have said, hey, well, there's something wrong about it, all that parking between that and 181 would have been a lot more attractive. They just put all their parking on the back. And I've never seen a Sherwin-Williams with more than 5 parking, you know, 5 painters parking there at one time. They're great, wonderful. I bought all my paint there and they deliver so quickly. But my point is just somebody saying, hey, y'all could save $30,000 by and have a lot more attractive building just taking that parking out and doing this and this. And
Well-
at the right time, maybe they would do it and you'd have a better product.
Yeah, I just meant better meet the intent of the zoning instead of attractive, because attractive is subjective. That's all I meant, because one person's attractive and another
Attractive is-
person's.
It is,
There's
but
so
ugly-
many
Ugly
things.
is ugly to everybody.
I disagree.
We're just trying to get away from
I
ugly.
disagree.
We're just trying to get away from ugly.
Yes,
That's all I'm
you
talking
can.
about.
Well, there's so many things that would need to be discussed as part of that.
Right.
Again,
It's a
our
prickly-
comprehensive plan's really looking out 20, 30 years. It's not something that we're gonna try to accomplish So even that matrix sets up more of a strategic plan of things we can accommodate in the next 5 years.
Right.
So, you know.
Well, and my issue, being a building code guy, if it's in writing, that's the rule, that's what you enforce. So you're gonna have to help me get my head around,
Yeah.
you know, this is a conceptual thing versus, okay, when he comes in, this is what you gotta do. Cause see, like, it mentioned bioswales, permeable paving, bioretention. We have a section of that in our city code supplement, building code supplement that we did, especially for these infill lots down here on the Fruit and Nut, where they're knocking down a house, building as much as they can, putting in their pool, putting in their patio, putting in their outdoor living. So I just want to make sure that we don't, look at it and let's make sure they don't conflict.
Right. Well, and really where that was coming from, and you and I both missed the 10 LID techniques as part of being part of a planning commission or in this world. But that was a requirement, had challenges, and then it went from that side to, okay, it's just up to the engineer. And there's been a lot of,
But they're
you know,
still
pushback.
supposed to use LID, but because we no longer make them list it, we never find out if they are or not. So,
Well,
I mean, I feel
one
like we
LID is
need
a
to
detention pond.
go back
so
to, yeah.
It works.
Well, and
it
understand.
So what's the medium?
I feel like we
You know,
missed the
how
boat
how
with
do we
that.
get to something that's
Right.
not so as,
creative LIDs.
But see, what I'm
Yeah,
talking
and when
about
we
too,
cut 'em some
though,
slack, it went
is
away.
not LIDs in
still
relation to
making
subregs.
right.
It's LIDs in relation to individual building lots that aren't covered in the subregs. And I don't want to keep everybody here, I just want to ask a couple other things.
I think good conversation.
No, historic preservation, a lot of the stuff that's in there is being taken care of. We have our first historic preservation meeting October 15th, setting up bylaws, establishing officers. A bunch of us are going to the conference in New Orleans, so we'll get that. The other thing, it mentioned parking. Encourage development of private paid parking. And the first thing popped into my head was my app I have to pay to park in downtown Pensacola on private property or in Mobile. Is that what you're thinking, or is that not what we're
Again,
thinking?
we paid a company that looks at things nationally, what things are there. So you see a lot of comments like, consider these things. What that really is saying is, as you're looking at projects, as you go through the matrix at the end, is to start tackling some of these things in the future. Hey, look at this, you know,
Right.
there's.
I just
in the
didn't know if
historic,
we
there's
were-
different options to accommodate some of those goals. They're saying, look at this. So, no, I'm not a fan of private subsidized parking lots and things like that, especially in downtown.
I just know if people bought properties downtown and they could do private paid, that would pay for itself very quickly. And we could wind up with a whole lot of unbuilt lots that have
Absolutely.
parking.
I
Have
think,
someone
I've been very
volunteering for
vocal
that
on, I'm
already.
not a fan of.
I think, you know, if there are things like that, you know, this is a living document that you change, but anything that you have issues with, a lot of that stuff can be removed.
Yeah, that's
on
no
the front
problem.
end. And then, you know, I
Absolutely.
mean, one issue that we've had is, in the past, you adopt a comprehensive plan, then you have so many changes. A lot of times more of the changes go to the subdivision of the comprehensive plan, which is more like the Bible. You know,
Right.
we don't want to have like where the Bible says, you know, happy is he who casts his child upon the stones. We don't necessarily want that line in our comprehensive
Right,
plan.
right.
But a lot of times you can argue, using something with the comprehensive plan to argue both sides of a.
It mentioned LSVs, regulating where they're allowed and considering them to 25 miles an hour or less. I am here to help you write that ordinance anytime you want to. Happy to do it. It said coordinating with Baldwin County Board of Education. The county commission passed a resolution or something that requires developers to contact the BCBE to let them know of developments coming. And my question is, would it not be something when we get stuff like this, that we have them present us a letter like they do a utility usage letter, that they have contacted the Board of Education
So the
about?
Board of Education has to play along with that, because the problem is, and there was a state, a bill proposed last year, it didn't get enough traction, but it required planning commissions
Yeah.
to do that. Now, we reach out, our GIS has a very good relationship with their GIS department, so we have a good, working relation at that level, but I think the challenge sometimes is the timelines we have. You know, under state law, we get an application, we have to act, we have to do this. So we've reached out before and
Okay.
just not gotten anything back. But I making that
I
from the
just-
developer.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times it can change by the time they get the letter to they get in front of a planning commission. But yeah, I think that's
I get
anything we can
questions
do.
down there frying fries every Friday night at the ball game. I get John Cardwell, or I get Josh Howell, or I get somebody come up to me asking me, hey, what's coming over here? I heard about this. What's the deal? And I was like, they hadn't come talk to you yet?
Yeah.
So, allowing ADUs, is that something you're open to? That was in there.
I am.
Yeah, I am, but the people I talk to with the building permits, I'm hearing more and more and more that I got a kid coming back from college that needs to move back here, but he doesn't want to live in his bedroom, or I have a elderly parent that, you know, I need to bring home and live with me, but they want some independence, and I just,
We
I think-
I hear
recommended
that a
it
lot.
to council 7 years ago.
And
Let's do
there's-
it again.
They're not the same thing, but I think the fear and the tied to short-term rentals and ADUs are always
not the
kind of
same
tied to
thing.
each other, but they're not the same thing. We are implementing, we've hired a company that helps us kind of track down and get the business license for short-term rentals, and we're finally implementing that. We started getting some emails and test stuff this week, actually. So I think, you know, if that's taken care of, you know, I certainly want to revisit, and I know Rebecca and Lee both have, you know, said, hey, let's revisit that, because they're very well-written regulations. Lee can't find it for me.
Well, it just got buried. I mean, we presented it to city council, we approved it unanimously, with one vote against it, and then it just was lost.
But we actually do, and maybe it's something we can try in certain
But
areas.
it was an excellent one, because it had nothing to do with short-term rentals. It said nothing, but basically, the one person who voted against
the
it, that
issue,
just
is the
went
rentals,
insane,
never
almost
renting 'em.
resigned. I told him, I said, if you're gonna get that mad over stuff, you just need to resign off the board, because he just flipped out. And I mean, you can be for or against something, but,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, if you're about to have a stroke in front of everybody and you're up here, it's kind of scary. But basically, he thought that every single house in the fruits and nuts and in the Bluff District would have a, you know, accessory dwelling unit. But what the requirement was the ADU had to meet the setback requirements, and the ADU plus the main building, all the buildings on the property, had to meet the footprint coverage. So when you look at your normal 66 by 132-foot lot, you couldn't have ADUs. There'd be some odd pie-shaped corner pieces lots here and there that might have one where it might work really well, but most of your lots couldn't.
It's basically
Couldn't
what's
have
already
them.
required, except you're allowed to put the shower and the
Except you
kitchen in.
put the shower in
I mean, it just
Well,
took away
officially
that.
instead of sneaking by and doing it later.
That's kind of funny. Probably the biggest opponents are in the areas where there's the most ADUs.
You
It's,
see,
as a whole.
and to my knowledge, we're the only ones that don't allow it, because I know when we were approving Baldwin County's own projects down in the county, they allow them. And talking to one of our inspectors that came here from Daphne, they allow it.
Yeah.
And he's asked me a lot of questions, because he's getting questions from folks in the field
And
about
it's
it.
certain areas, and that's kind of what if you really get into the weeds, we do suggest let's try it in some areas. Instead of just going blanket across the, let's try it in some areas. And I think there's some areas that are very close to some of the tourist resort districts and some of that it makes sense. I mean,
Well,
it's right
but
there
that's,
blended.
not to interrupt, but that's almost saying that they're for rental use. People who want them for their parents, their children coming home from school, or their caretaker, but they don't want them in the house, they could be anywhere.
You know
They don't
what's
have to be in the
really
tourist district.
interesting is every residential PUD we've seen, we've tried to say, hey, why
aren't
don't
you doing that?
propose ADUs in this PUD? You know, they don't want to. It's fast, it's quick. They don't want, it's,
Even home
instead of-
office, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, even some of this we looked at tonight.
Well,
I think there's
I
a
ran
great
into
amount.
North Hills. I got a house came in with an ADU, and I turned them down, and I got a call from a very distraught developer. He said, if you look at our PUD, lots 15 through 21 allow them. And I said, well, you've got 80 houses, why those 5? And he said, well, that's just what we wanted to do. So either yes or no.
Right. Well, and which one was that?
That was
Hilltop or-
North Hills.
Hilltop.
No. I'm sorry.
Rock Creek.
The waters was where it happened, was in the waters.
That was,
Okay. So last one, and you and I'll bring some of this to the lunch tomorrow because there's a couple other things that I'm talking about. But it also mentioned disallowing single-family detached and duplexes in the CBD. I don't know if that's something we want to do, or my thought was limit the size of it, because I don't think the 4 duplexes for the Airbnbs on the corner of Oak and Bancroft are a bad thing.
well,
But they're not big. They're small, and they're not intended for somebody to live there. It's come in for the weekend and then head out. So those are the things I saw that kind of were,
so I think
Yeah,
this
is it
was a little bit more,
single-family or
we
is it
always have that
hospitality?
challenge of, somebody builds a single-family home right next to commercial and heavier stuff.
Right.
And then starts complaining about all the noise and the stuff.
but see,
that's
that's
happening.
if you limit the size and tell them it can't be over 600 or 700 square feet, that's not conducive to a family living downtown anyway. That's going to be, I would think, a business investment
the
that you could do
use.
as a rental.
So one of the,
Limit the use that
and
it has to-
to give you a little bit more clarity on that, one of the things where, almost as part of this short-term rental, we will be coming relatively soon. We can catch our breath on big projects and focus on some amendments. We have short-term rental right now. It basically just says you can do it in these zoning districts. There's no tie to requirements of parking, of things like that. So you have to then apply, is it a house being used as a short-term rental? Is it a hotel? Is it a bed and breakfast? Is it this? That's not typically the way those are set up, so we're gonna create some other smaller units besides bed and breakfast and hotel, or propose that, and have some of those parking requirements. And that's what something like you're talking about would fit under,
Well,
instead of a single-family home.
Well, from my standpoint, in a building code classification, doesn't matter if it's 500 square feet or 5,000 square feet, it's a single family or it's a duplex.
Right.
So, and it talked about broadly across the CBD. So I didn't know if that's something we want to
There's
consider.
just some of those, and for anybody listening, we're not changing anything anybody has. This is new, if it's coming in new, but there is a component of somebody putting truly a single-family residence right in the middle
Oh, we
of
got a bunch
commercial.
of 'em.
And then it's selling 2 years later, and then those people just complain about everything that's commercial.
Yeah.
That maybe it, just like we look at, is a trash, garbage dump next to a resident or subdivision, is that the appropriate use? Maybe they're incompatible land uses that single family might be incompatible in downtown.
We need to adjourn because.
I will, you let me
Because
talk enough, thank you.
Rebecca and I need to fight until she says she's wrong and I'm right, so.
Mr. Chairman,
We got a fight
I'll make a
coming up
motion
right
to
now.
adjourn.
Do I have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mini storage building.